Hi, Nicole. How are you?
Hi, Belinda. I'm well. How about yourself?
I'm well, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to be interviewed today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I'm going to start with your bio. Nicole Longmire is an international board certified lactation consultant, certified birth story listener, childbirth educator, postpartum doula, and is trained by the Institute for the Study of Birth, Breath, and Death as a holding space facilitator. Before being called into this work in 2019, Nicole worked in a variety of roles in early childhood development, including early intervention, social emotional learning, parenting education, and classroom teaching. She is the founder of Mother Nurture Consulting, based in Florida. And in her current role, she helps families prepare for and navigate the journey to and through parenthood with compassion and understanding. After experiencing the death of her infant son in 2021, she felt an additional calling to work with women who have experienced pregnancy and infant loss, traumatic birth, and breastfeeding grief, as well as supporting them with lactation after loss. She is a mom to her living son and two bonus sons and is a proud military spouse. Is there anything you'd like
Wow.
to add to that?
She sounds so interesting.
Definitely to me, 100%.
Thank you for sharing all of that. Yes.
Course, of course. I love your background. You have a really broad range of background, especially having the death and birth sort of continuum and knowing early childhood
Mm.
and all of that goes with parenting.
Yeah.
So I want to share with our people that I reached out to you because of a reel that you shared that really inspired me. It intrigued me. On it, you basically write that your baby is not manipulating you by waking. They
Mm.
don't know they've been born. They don't know they are separate from you. They rely on physical closeness to regulate. This is called co regulation. Your baby will need this for many years in many ways. What really interested me about this post was, oh my gosh, they don't know they've been born.
Yeah.
I don't know if there are a lot of people that are aware of that. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. It's powerful, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, we have this understanding now about human development in what we call the fourth trimester, which we'll get to. And, what we know about this time is that it is essentially a continuation of the development in the womb. And so many of the same principles really are still at play. So, one thing that I always tell families, parents, when I'm working with them is your baby being outside your body doesn't mean that your body is not still their home. And so your baby still needs, especially in that newborn phase, in that fourth trimester, your body still meets every need that your baby could possibly have. And so that's very eye-opening for parents to understand. And sometimes they give me sort of a raised eyebrow. And I think, okay, they're resisting that. And so we talk through it and we say, well, what are the needs of a newborn? What do they need? And when we list out those things, we realize it's the same things that they had when they were in utero, right? They need warmth, they need movement, right? They need nourishment, constant nourishment. They need that tightness, that closeness, right? And all of those needs can still be met outside the womb by mother's body or parent's body. Partners can be part of this as well, of course. But the idea that this baby doesn't even know they've been born, um, we see that in their reflexive responses, right, to the environment. So we have these little newborns that startle and I try to show parents like this is their language. We need to tap into the wisdom of your baby. They're startling because that's a reflex that's inborn, not only to, protect them and make sure they're still breathing and make sure, they're protected from things like SIDS. We know that that startle reflex is protective, but they startle and then they might cry out because they thought they, would just be met by that softness, right? I thought I was still, it's kind of like when you felt those baby kicks, that was your baby startling, right? And then they're met by this warmth and this softness. And so we see that when these babies, startle and then they settle back into it. And sometimes they can be quite upset
Yes.
because they don't realize they're separate. And so it actually reminds me a lot of like a baby kangaroo,
Mhm.
which of course is a marsupial, and we're not marsupials, but baby kangaroos are like the size of a jelly bean when they're born. And then they crawl up the mother's abdomen and then they crawl inside this pouch and
Mm.
they finish their development inside the pouch and they have unlimited access to the mother's milk. And I kind of think of us as, kangaroos without a pouch.
Yeah, that's a really good analogy. And I'm currently reading, I mean, my daughter is 14 years old right now, but I'm reading Magical Child by
Nice.
Joseph Chilton Pearce. Did you read that book yet?
Nice. I'm familiar. I haven't read it, but I am familiar.
So in there, he shares research done by some researchers comparing like Ugandan babies and how when they first come, when they get basically the mother walks around until she actually gives birth. Then she gives birth and she comes back out. She just has the baby carried with her next to her bosom, right? And the baby is literally sort of like in that cocoon kangaroo phase, and they're just so much more well adapted because they're just part of it's a continuation of being in the womb except outside the body.
Yes. Yes. And that's exactly what it is. The birth, I think in our culture, the birth is like thought of as like the finish line. And really it's just another portal or another step in the development, And so then after we cross over that, we cross through that threshold, you know, there's so much more development obviously that's coming, but this little creature is still very dependent on the body. So yeah, that research is just fascinating to me.
Yes,
Fascinating.
it is. And so knowing that you also have, you also do postpartum care, a lot of the conversation that we really need to be focusing on when somebody is pregnant, wanting to become pregnant, is that she has the support that she needs after birth to really be able to cocoon herself and be the external arm of this new baby that's come to
Mm,
physical form.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's the fundamental challenge. But one thing that I try to also empower women with when they're pregnant is the main task that you have of this pregnancy is to prepare to become a mother. That's your task. That's your job. And you can never be too prepared. There's lots, there's on the job training, but your task isn't the nursery and the all the things, right? That's sort of the societal, pressure tasks, and those things are fine.
Yeah.
But if we lose sight of what is truly the task here, it's to prepare to become a mother. And I think we have very unrealistic expectations of what it's really like. And uh, we really also have a lack of understanding of why it's like that. And I think both are important because I never want to, I don't want to be on either extreme and say motherhood is beautiful, motherhood is wonderful, nursing your baby is glorious. It can be, and it can get to that place. But saying that doesn't do anybody any favors, because for a while in the beginning, it's this heavy, heavy caregiving time. It's not, you're not getting a lot back from this little creature. You're just giving, they're taking, right? But the flip side of that is to say, oh my gosh, postpartum is just awful. And I don't think that's helpful either.
No,
And
no,
so,
beautiful,
yeah,
actually.
neither one helps. So coming in the middle and understanding what is it really like and why is it like that? And I always start from the framework of nature's design is pretty close to perfect. And so in most circumstances, right? This is all a system that is designed to work. And it's actually pretty simple.
Yeah.
And I say that to my clients when we're preparing for, for feeding. We talk about breastfeeding and they say, "Oh, well, you're not going to show me how to position and latch." And I'm like, "Your baby's not even here yet. Let's talk about the head game really of this." And it's actually so simple, but also so hard because of the world that we live in and the culture that we're in. But you're absolutely right. That is the task of preparing for postpartum, is finding a way for that family, because all families are unique.
Yeah.
There's no one size fits all postpartum plan. But finding a way for that family to get as many of their needs met so that partners can do what they need to do to allow mothers to do what they need to do to allow babies to continue in their development and their growth.
Yeah, and it's probably no good to note that, you did mention about preparing for the baby. It's really not about setting up the nursery, because that can come later. Because I feel like if your mindset is setting up the nursery, then you're automatically thinking once the baby comes, oh, this baby goes into the nursery, into the bed. And would really be helpful is really not having a nursery, but actually having the baby nearby you and you cocooning. And it really just is about preparing your mindset to receive this child and be the nurturer and be nurtured, as opposed to all the other things that we miss being present when
Mhm.
we're future thinking and preparing for these things that really aren't very valuable in the first year of life.
Yeah. And I'm not knocking anyone for having a beautiful nursery that they carefully curated from Pinterest. I've done it. But we have to recognize, just like you said, that crib is probably going to become your most expensive laundry hamper. It's just not, your baby's not broken because they don't want to be in that crib away from you. They don't know they've been born.
Right. Yeah. And so you also talk about the co-regulation. And can you share some of the ways that baby will need co-regulation in the years to come? So share a little bit about the co-regulation baby when the baby first comes, and then also in the years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so first, I kind of think it's helpful for anybody listening and just for our conversation to sort of work backwards. So even as adults, we need co-regulation, right? And we use co-regulation strategies. If I'm having a hard day, we have teenagers also. And if I'm having a hard afternoon or hard evening with our three teenage boys, and my husband can recognize that, sometimes just a really tight hug, just sort of calm, and he can feel, the tension. So for me, that touch, and that's very like womb like, right? So there's still, for adults, there's something sort of safe and grounding about that.
Yeah.
Um, of course, as adults, ideally, we can do a lot of our own self-regulation, but the way that we arrive at self-regulation is through mastery experiences, right? We know that's sort of how development progresses and from years and years of co-regulation. And so co-regulation essentially is, this baby or young child practicing regulation skills. So practicing what self-regulation might look like appropriate for their age with a caregiver. And so if we have this little newborn, that has startled, and, often they can sort of just kind of, nestle back down to sleep. They don't always startle to a full awake state and cry, but sometimes they do. So if we have this little baby who is startled and who is now crying, that baby doesn't yet have the skill to self-regulate and realize, hey, everything's okay, I'm safe, right? If we did nothing, if we didn't interfere at all, that baby would likely continue to cry and maybe even increase, right, in their volume and their pitch and things like that. Because they're trying to elicit that care, trying to elicit that co-regulation. And so ways that baby might need us to co-regulate, maybe it's some patting, maybe it's some shushing, maybe it's some picking up, maybe it's some holding, maybe it's some nursing. There's so many tools that we have. But that little baby will eventually learn, right, that when I wake in the night, my 13-year-old, when I wake in the night because I've had a bad dream, that everything's actually okay. I can check in with myself. Do I need to use the bathroom? Do I need a drink of water? Do I just need to change positions? And I can settle back to sleep. But that doesn't just happen. That's years of, bad dreams and coming into mom and dad's room. And, it progresses, right? So it starts with those very basic sort of primal things, that a baby's going to need that co-regulation, because everything a newborn is doing is instinct. And that's another important thing to remind new parents about. Your baby isn't making any decisions. Your newborn is not making any decisions right now. They're not saying, I'm awake. I'd really like mommy to come in here and hold me. I think I'm going to cry.
Right.
Right? I woke up, I startled. Oh my gosh, I'm not being held. I don't smell my mommy. I don't hear daddy's voice, whatever. And now I'm afraid. And my instinct is I might be in danger, because it's that very primal, primitive part of our brain. And so that baby is going to need that co-regulation, for years. And that's, sort of where this like nighttime parenting, comes in, because then we get into like sleep and sleep training and how that's messing with that development and all of that.
Yeah, that's
But
interesting that you
yeah.
mentioned that, because when we're talking, when they startle, obviously it's like startle from sleep. And if we have the baby nearby, it probably is more helpful to the parents, even if the baby is, they have those like little additional beds that you can put next to your next to your bed, right?
Mhm.
Where you can just kind of roll over and comfort them.
Mhm.
Because I would imagine that it's a little bit more frustrating for a parent when the baby's crying to get up and go to the extra bedroom, the baby's nursery, to soothe them. So in that
Absolutely.
respect, it's also kind of smart to have the baby nearby you for a couple of years, I guess.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's sort of the secret that a lot of parents, I think they're keeping it, because I think a lot more parents really are co-sleeping and bed sharing than we'll talk about it. I know my experience with my son was, you go to the pediatrician and they give you your sleep talk and you just kind of smile and nod, and then I co-slept for 2 years, so but you're right. It's I startle, I feel a hand, maybe I get access to the breast, maybe I hear that soothing voice, I feel the warmth, and I can pretty quickly get back into a safe, regulated place. And over time, the length of time that it's going to take me to get into that safe, regulated place is going to get shorter and shorter.
Yes.
Right. And so it's sort of the opposite of like this old idea of like spoiling a baby or making a rod for your own back, or, if you pick that baby up every time, then she's just going to think that you're going to pick her up every time. And I say,
Right.
exactly,
Oh,
exactly.
it's like counterintuitive, right? Because you're like,
Mhm.
oh, if you have them in your bed and you co-sleep, then they're never gonna leave. But in actuality, if you only partially co-sleep, they're not sure whether they're gonna get that safety, and so you're gonna have to co-sleep
Take
for
longer.
longer if it's like partial, right? Oh yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And, there's actually some science as far as like reflexes go, just because we're sort of on this little sidebar and we've talked about the startle reflex. Swaddling is not something that I am like a huge proponent of. And I won't go into like all the details, but essentially the reason swaddling works so well is it's because it's inhibiting a natural reflex, right? So it's preventing the baby from startling and waking, right? And so yes, it works because it's going to keep your baby asleep for longer. That does increase the risks of sudden infant death. So we know that SIDS deaths are going to have an association with multiple things. There's multiple risk factors. And swaddling is potentially a risk because we have this longer stretch of sleep. And then there's some research that supports that when we inhibit those reflexes and we don't allow them to do that and then get back into that space, that it actually takes longer for that reflex to integrate. So it's just like what you said, it's to make it like super simple and very black and white, and it's not, of course, it's human evolution and biology, but to oversimplify it, the more we restrict the startle reflex, the longer the baby is going to do the startle reflex. And the less we restrict it and we allow it to work through, right? The faster and more appropriate, length of time it's going to take this reflex to actually integrate. And so counterintuitive maybe, but yeah, the it's like the more you respond to that child, because then when we get into childhood, the more you respond consistently with the same, you know, nurturing, you're holding space for them, I'm here. They start to learn that not only is my caregiver there for me, but that must mean that the world is okay and that other caregivers are going to be there for me, right? So now I'm believing maybe the world is actually kind of safe and not so scary, and I don't have to be scared of everything, right? And I'm learning that I'm not going to get punished when I feel this, you know, these feelings. And that's the early childhood part of me, like it's okay to feel angry. What do we do with that? When we feel angry, you point with the preschoolers on the board, which face matches how you feel. And they're like, this one. I'm like, okay. So what can we do with that feeling? The feeling is human, but the behavior and the action, is we're trying to teach them to be humans. We're trying to teach them to eventually be adults. So lots of co-regulation, throughout all of childhood and again, even into adulthood is certainly helpful. But yeah, we
Yeah, and even when you were saying, they're not trying to wake you, but also that extends to when they get a little bit older and they're toddlers. Their energies, however they're expressing themselves, they're not being premeditated. They're not trying to irritate you. It's just who they are.
right, yeah. And even when we see children testing boundaries, that's part of learning. We test boundaries. How late can I be for that appointment before my doctor reschedules me? Oh, they don't care if you're late. You can
Right.
walk in 10 minutes. You know what I mean? Like So we're always testing boundaries. But just when little people do it, we get really upset.
Right. Right. Right.
Sit down, be quiet, stop doing that. But they're just trying to figure out their space and their place and who they are in the world. So it's really important that we meet them where they are. And I think what can be so helpful is if the sooner parents can learn this.
Mm-hmm.
So if they can learn this before they even have a baby, and then they have an opportunity to practice and practice and practice being responsive to that child and understanding my baby's not manipulating me, and start seeing the fruits of that labor, you know,
Yes.
as that baby gets older, you'll see. You'll see. I had
Yeah.
a client recently that said she's nursing her 18-month-old and she's getting lots of pressure to stop. And she said, but what's so funny is those same people that are, kind of asking me like, why are you still nursing this walking human, getting all weirded out by nursing a toddler? She said those same people always comment on what a happy baby she is. And they're
Right.
like, she's just so chill. She's so happy. You got so lucky. And she's like, no,
Oh,
this is what this is, right? This is that give and take. This is that responsiveness. And I'm not saying you only can achieve that if you breastfeed into toddlerhood. That's not the message here. But
oh.
for this mom and baby, they have a synchronicity, right? And this baby is secure. She knows
Right.
who she is.
Right. That's the
It's
part
beautiful.
of it, right? It's like
Yes,
the security that she feels because her
that's
mother
right.
is co-regulating with her
That's right.
and in tune.
Yep.
Okay, so you offer a variety of services to support birth before and after the actual birth, right? When I look at your services, most of them include the mothering nurtured
Mm-hmm.
planning session. So can you share a little bit more about the mothering nurtured after birth
Yes.
planning?
Yes, yes. Thank you for asking this because this is something that I, didn't start out when you're starting out in this field, you're trying to just change the world, right? We're all world changers here, right? We have these big dreams. And so my main work has been as a lactation consultant. But I really quickly realized that if I could just help the families prepare for postpartum, then they would actually be pretty prepared for breastfeeding. Like these two things kind of go hand in hand, right? So then I did my postpartum doula and, got some additional training and things like that. And then of course my company is called Mother Nurture, and it really encompasses sort of what I believe, which is, I think you even sort of said it earlier, like in order for mothers to be able to continue to be that source of life and nourishment for the baby, right? She has to be nurtured. So this mothering nurtured planning session, the idea of this is how are we going to move you through birth and then this fourth trimester, that you and your baby, you're recovering, your baby is slowly starting to realize they're separate from you, takes a few months. And this period of time, we've actually coined a term now, I'm sure you're familiar, called matrescence, where it's similar to adolescence, right?
Okay.
Matrescence and adolescence, but it's this really sharp hormone shift, right? That we go through after having a baby. And so matrescence essentially means just sort of like the process of becoming a mother and everything that encompasses. And so in these sessions, my goal is to help the mother and the family, if there are support people, talk through what are our resources? What do we have access to? Because we can't work from something we don't have. And not everybody has the luxury of taking a year off and hiring a housekeeper and having a postpartum doula, and that's just not the reality for a lot of families. If it is the reality, let's put that in place. You might as well. But where can we shift our focus? Could we design, for example, some specific things? Have you done your registry yet? Because everybody, that's a thing, right? That's a cultural, it's a societal thing. Oh, I'm working on it. Okay, let's kind of go through it and let's see what can wait. And let's kind of do a little math and let's figure out if we could free up, some funds and maybe reroute those to services. Maybe that is a postpartum doula. Maybe that's hiring me. Maybe that's hiring someone in your area if I'm not local to you. Maybe it's hiring, someone to help you clean the house for the first month. Maybe it's hiring, um, a babysitter or a nanny for your other child, so that you can have that space and that time, whatever that looks like. And so then I have just a variety of tools that I use and worksheets and things that I've developed that just sort of help families and partners, because partners are really important here too.
Yes.
And they can go through their own mental health challenges, postpartum. They can struggle to sort of know what their role is.
Yeah.
And so that's a big part of this too, is getting some good language, because I think language really matters around, well, what is your role? And I will correct them if they say things like, well, I'm going to help her. I'm like, no, no, no. She doesn't need help. She needs sharing. When we say help, it sort of implies that everything's her job and you're just going to be her helper, right?
Right. Right.
You
Language
know what I
matters.
mean? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So these words matter and it helps families. What was that? I didn't catch it.
How are you going to participate?
That's right. How are you going to participate? How are you going to come into your own parenthood, right? What are some worries? Do we have anything competing here? A really common one will be, because inevitably we talk about what are your feeding goals? What are your feeding plans? Are we breastfeeding or, what are we doing? And so very often I will hear, yes, I want to exclusively breastfeed. And then later in the conversation, I might hear things about, well, getting up in the middle of the night, like that just really, makes me anxious and I don't do well if I don't have sleep, and so we'll kind of like unpack that a little bit. And then maybe I realized, this is these are competing needs. And sometimes moms will even say, I want to exclusively breastfeed, but I know that I'm going to feel resentful towards my partner if I have to do all the feeding. So I don't know what I want to do. And then we'll say, okay, so now let's figure that out. How
Yeah.
do we get there? Right? What does that look like? And then there's multiple ways that we can sort of meet in the middle and give everybody sort of a role to play. So yeah, those sessions are very customized, very personalized, and it's an important part of all of my doula services. So when I'm meeting with somebody and they want me to work with them as their doula, we have this session. This like is our planning session.
Or they
Um,
have the
Yes, so that I can know as well, what my role is going to be in all of this. But it's now something that I just offer, sort of a la carte, because I think it's so important for families to understand this is what matters in the postpartum. That beautiful nursery, that, all those cute matching outfits, I love them as much as you do. They're wonderfully adorable and precious, but they're not going to help you with your mental health. They're not going to help you feel not like you're failing as a mom when this baby isn't latching and you haven't showered in 3 days, So let's talk about how we can keep you in that good space that you need to be in so how do we keep you nurtured so you can do your nurturing and your nourishing for your baby?
Yeah, that's so important. And I'm wondering, do you know, are there any books that you could recommend, or just maybe they just, I don't know, but like books that talk about how important nurturing the mother and fortifying the family unit is. And as part of your service as a doula postpartum, do you also offer sort of like after the baby's born and now they're in the thick of it? like a 1 month check-in, 2 month check-in for both partners
Mhm.
so that each can feel heard, knowing now what's necessary.
Yes. So books, I have a whole library of books. One that is coming to mind that is a very easy read. It's a short little book. It's actually called Newborn Mothers, but it's a really beautiful book and it speaks to all of this about how, yes, this baby has been born, but so has this mother. This is a newborn mother. So it's a really good book and it's inexpensive and small. But I can also send some additional resources and we can link them for readers and viewers. Check-ins, yeah. So one thing that is really amazing, there's a lot of things about our modern world that I think have created problems for for us and for families and for babies and all these things. But there are also some blessings, and one of those amazing, wonderful things is the ability to connect with people all over the world. And so, just like you and I are in two totally different places and we're having a conversation, I can work with families anywhere. And I have clients literally all over the world. And so, I offer a virtual doula where I'm not obviously not coming into your home. I'm not doing the laundry and making you broth and rubbing your feet and helping you with latching like I might be doing for one of the mothers that lives near me. But we have more of a structured kind of like what you described, like check-ins. And partners are always encouraged and welcome to be there. And I very much like to include partners in that prenatal, not only in that like planning session, but if we're doing any sort of specific breastfeeding education or even childbirth education, partners support people. And sometimes that support person is a mother or a grandmother.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
had that and that's wonderful. Whoever that person is going to be, it's really helpful for them to participate in that.
Yes. So basically, somebody that is going to have a baby could tap into your services and have you actually coach. Let's say they have a mother that's going to come into town and stay with them for 30 days, right? And their partner. So it would be great for them to be coached by you to know how they could kind of take on the role that you would have done if you were there. But let's say somebody in Oregon is contacting you, then you would be able to guide the mother or the grandmother and the partner to do these
Absolutely.
things, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that would be an ideal scenario where we all get together on Zoom and we talk through it and like I said, I have worksheets and things where we actually like can write things down and what are your goals and sometimes I'll have partners, fill it out and then like don't show each other your answers, like what is your biggest worry about postpartum? What's your biggest worry, and it's really interesting to see maybe dad is like, I'm afraid she's going to cry all the time. When mom is like, I'm afraid like the baby is not going to latch, and we're like, you know, your
Right.
biggest worry is this and your biggest worry is this. And so like let's talk about it. So I think that would be wonderful and ideal. And absolutely we could talk about, again, it needs to be strengths based and it needs to be based on meeting that family where they are. So if grandma is really, really good with baby care because she's a 30-year retired mother baby, nurse, that may or may not be a good thing. Sometimes that can be she knows what to do, she's a professional. But we can tap into that and figure out, well, where do we need the boundaries to be? You're not the nurse. You're going to have that nursing knowledge, but you got to take that hat off. You're the grandmother, what is your role now? Yeah. And what is your role? And grandmother support, whether it's your own mother or your mother-in-law, is so important for breastfeeding. I just shared, some research on this. It's actually one of the most important next to the partner. It's like the most important significant person in that mother's world when it comes to her feeding decisions and choices and whether or not, she breastfeeds or continues to breastfeed. So grandmothers have a very important role to play. And yeah, coaching them through like how is everybody going to use their individual strengths and superpowers to help nurture this brand new newborn mother.
Right, because it's really big and there's a lot going on and mothers need to be nurtured.
Yeah.
So, what are three things that you can share about postpartum? Like
Mm,
how to take care of the mother, how to nurture the mother. What are the three things that people can consider?
mm. Wow. Let's see. There's so many things swirling in my head, but so I think the first thing is understanding that to really do, because you're going to listen to me talking, us talking about this, and maybe you're going to read a book that says you should do these things, and it sounds really great, right? And you're going, yeah, 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 that's what I should do. And then when you're in it, I find so often that mothers are like, I can't stay in the bed for 5 days. I tell them 5-5-5, which is my 5-5-5 rule. 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, and 5 days near the bed. So that's 15 days that you shouldn't really even be leaving your bedroom, right? The baby is brought to you or stays with you. Food is brought to you. Water is brought to you. You get up to go to the bathroom and that's it, right?
Oh,
And when you're telling them this, inevitably in a prenatal class, you've got this beautiful pregnant mommy, maybe you've got partner next to her, and she goes, uh-huh, 5-5-5. Yep, I'm staying in bed. She loves it. And then I see them, I see the couple later maybe, and they'll go, oh God, it was awful. I couldn't stay in bed. I just felt so guilty that I wasn't helping or I wasn't contributing. And it's because we are so conditioned to be productive
yes.
and we don't know how to slow down. And we don't know that sometimes the most productive thing you can do in that moment is just lean in right here, shrink it all down and lean right in right here to this little person and what this little person needs and listen to your body and let your body heal. So I think that's one thing.
Love it. Love the
So,
5-5-5.
yes, the 5-5-5 and understand that it's going to be really hard for you to do, but that it's really important. And so maybe you need to come up with some mantras or, some affirmations. I listen to my body. I trust its boundaries, right? I trust when it tells me its limits. Like if you've done too much, you're going to probably have a little extra bleeding that day if we're early enough. So I tell my mamas, like, if you've overexerted yourself, your body will tell you, so you need to listen to that, right? So that would be one, 5-5-5. I think the second thing about postpartum that's really important to understand is that, and I touched on it already, but those first few weeks, there's not a whole lot of like give back from this little baby, right? It's a lot more give, than receive as the primary caregiver, which is usually the mother. Um, and so a lot of times mothers feel like they're doing something wrong, or maybe they don't feel that immediate bond or that immediate attachment. You immediately love your baby. You might have this sort of, if you're lucky, euphoric experience right after the birth. That's super cool, but not everybody gets that. And then it sort of like all settles and you're like, okay, yes, I love this baby, but is this what everyone's talking about? Because I'm not like feeling it yet. And so what I think is really important to understand is that attachment this attachment thing that happens between mothers and babies, it happens in very similar ways for the baby to attach to the mother as it does for the mother to attach to the baby, but they move at very different paces. So the baby comes out attached. I know your smell. I know your voice. I know your movements. I know everything about you, right? Because I could hear you and feel you and all those things, right? So the baby pretty quickly attaches, and that makes biological sense, right? Because the baby has to survive and all these things. So your baby's attached. But for you, as the mother, it takes a little longer, right? And if we're distracted and not leaning in and coming down and being with and learning the cues and really spending this, learning the steps to the dance, with our baby, it's going to take longer to achieve that bond, because we got to be in it. We got to go in with the baby to sort of learn each other. So I think that would sort of be like takeaway number 2 is that um, it's it's not necessarily abnormal to not feel bonded right away. But I certainly don't want to normalize like feeling detached from your baby because that's also not normal. We do want you to get there. And so doing all of these things is also going to help you get there. I know you said 3 things, but I really think, those 2 things are so fundamental. So maybe I'll just also say that if you can really prepare for postpartum, and we almost need it. We need a different word. I would love to have more people saying, matrescence. If you could
Right.
prepare for matrescence, because postpartum, unfortunately, has been associated with postpartum depression.
Right.
And we still hear people say that, oh, I had postpartum. Like
Uh,
you,
we're all postpartum if we've had a baby.
yeah, you are postpartum, right? You might have had postpartum depression, or
Yeah.
postpartum anxiety. So that word has sort of, but we'll use it. If you can truly prepared for a nurtured, right, there it is, nurtured postpartum so that you can do your mothering from a nurtured place, which is the whole sort of like bedrock of what I believe and how I try to deliver my services. Excuse me. Then the rest actually falls into place pretty well. You
Yeah,
know,
I think this also falls into, when you're talking about this, I think generally society asks us not to focus on ourselves because it seems selfish,
mm,
right? And I think we're at this point right now where we are recognizing in the broader scheme, and this is like totally outside of baby talk, but
mm,
that like everything begins with us, right? Our perceptions is what colors our world, right?
yeah,
And so we have to learn as mothers to ask for what we need. And so when we're talking about the things that we need, what we need as we're preparing for birth, be thoughtful around yourself and
mm,
ask and take because we naturally give and we're already giving birth to this new life and we have to be present and we have to be nurtured. And
mm.
so we have to ask for the nurturing. And if we don't know how, like if I'm having a child and I don't know what I need to support myself because I've never had one, no one's ever talked to me about it, and I didn't read a book, ask Nicole. Find a doula in your area, find Nicole, and they'll tell you what you need, what's important. It's okay to have a baby shower, and all you're asking for gifts is money towards support of
Yes.
the
Yeah.
meal train, the doula, and whatever else you guys need, like a kitty for whatever comes up later.
Yeah. Yeah,
With
absolutely. Curate your postpartum with the same attention that you're curating that Amazon registry, right?
right,
Like, because, you're just, I'm not saying you don't need things. Some products can be helpful. I'm not knocking stuff, but yeah, it's what is going to help me really have the experience that I want, because everything else is available with 2-day shipping, right? I mean, that's the reality. Oh, I forgot to order that bouncy thing. Let's get one. I think we could use it. Let's get one. Nobody ever says, gosh, I really, looking back, if I had had that bouncer, that would have
Oh,
just solved so much, right? But we absolutely look back and go, oh my gosh, if I had had in-home support,
yeah.
I mean, my last postpartum doula client is her second baby. And she said, oh, I'm ready to pay you now. I don't even need, just come. I
Yeah.
already know. I already know I want you. I need you. Whatever you do will be wonderful. And it will be better than the first time because she learned that, like, I suffered.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. And I also, speaking of like baby showers, I just wanted to throw this in for anybody watching. I saw the most amazing idea and I think it's fantastic. Instead of a baby shower, it's called a nesting party. And you
Okay.
have all of your girlfriends come over and they clean and cook. And you guys do these things together, right? And maybe you set up a little space. I'm not saying don't have any cute little things for your baby, maybe a nursing station, with your pump if you're going to pump, whatever. Have all your things, but clean your house, because inevitably you're going to come home and you're going to think, oh my gosh, my house is not good enough. My house is not clean enough. My house is, we just, nothing's good enough for this perfect little baby, right? So you clean, you cook, you freeze meals, you play some music, everybody oohs and ahs over your cute belly. I just think it's the best idea.
Yeah, that is a really good idea. Okay, really quickly,
Yes.
one more thing that I wanted to ask. Somebody had a baby C-section.
Yep.
Is there anything more that you would want to add that they would want to better take care of themselves?
Yes, definitely stay in the bed. No. Yeah, so I've had both types of birth. I've had a C-section and an unmedicated VBAC. Um, and the recovery is different, but also similar. I think one thing that's always really shocking is C-section mamas don't realize you actually will still have bleeding after a section. They're like, what is this? I didn't push a baby out, but you still will have that. And so, you're healing from major abdominal surgery and you're not going to have the strength to get up and do these things. So I think if I could share one thing that would be most helpful for a C-section is, not only are you going to be dealing with the feelings of like, oh, I'm not being productive, and you're already going to be kind of wrestling with that, but you're going to also feel, potentially, not everyone, but I hear it a lot and I remember feeling it, just sort of like an invalid. I mean, because physically like you need help getting up, you need help doing all these basic things. And so I feel like it can add a layer of helplessness, and we don't do so well with that. And especially if the C-section was unwanted, then we may have some unresolved disappointment, maybe even birth trauma. And so I do a lot of work with birth trauma because I am a birth trauma survivor. I say that now. I've like really tried to lean into owning that, a birth trauma survivor. It really resonates with me. And so I recognize, that trauma in other women. And so C-sections are not inherently traumatic, but sometimes what gets you to that section can have lots of charged, heavy emotions. And so, um, yeah, you might need, there might be like another task for you, which is going to be working through that. And I do the birth story listening, which is through the birth story medicine school, which is a wonderful way to process a birth that was difficult or didn't go as planned, and sort of work through some of that. So, yeah, it's
That's something that you offer as well.
yes, yes.
Wonderful. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome. This has been great. I love talking about this kind of stuff.
I know it's so important. We have to talk about mothers so much more often and caring for our mothers. Is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Just, I don't want to end on a negative note, but I think that I'd be remiss if I didn't share a statistic that tells us that suicide is one of the leading causes of maternal death in the first year postpartum. And I think that is a real wake-up call for us to, like you've said, have these conversations. Mothers and anyone who identifies as a mother, I use the word mother, it feels good to me. I'm certainly not trying to exclude anyone, but yeah, mothers are incredibly important, and we need our moms to be okay. And so everyone plays a part in that. It's not just those of us that are doing like professional work. We all play a role in that. So, yeah, if you're watching, go next time you're at the grocery store and you see a mom having a hard time, just give her a little smile, tell her she's doing a great job. Those things go a long, long way.
Oh, absolutely. Now, the name of the book is Newborn Mother.
Newborn Mothers. I can tell you the author, Julia Jones. Yes, Julia Jones. And Julia actually has her website is newbornmothers.com. And then she actually, I believe, offers training, to people who want to support mothers and some add-on sort of like training for people like us who are working in this space in some capacity. I've never done any of her trainings, but I do really love her book. So yeah, Newborn Mothers by Julia Jones.
I almost feel like everyone could use that book, whether you're a mother or, everyone knows a mother. Everyone
Yes,
knows somebody who's going to be a mother.
yes,
Read
yes,
this book so that we can reframe our minds. Like, gosh, the next time somebody invites me to a baby shower, I'm really going to pull them aside and just be like, also, what else do you need to nurture yourself?
yeah,
Just kind of keep bringing the conversation back to them so
yes,
that they can keep realizing, oh, I can ask for more for myself. And it's
absolutely.
about me. And I do need me time.
Yeah, I feel like there's no creature as neglected as the postpartum mom
Yeah, in this society.
in this society. Yeah. Yeah. And it's really sad. So we have the opportunity to be to have those ripple effects, truly, even if it is you're at the store and you tell a mom like you're doing awesome.
Yeah.
Like really great, even if she's not, like it doesn't matter, just tell her, or
Uh,
you know,
just that acknowledgement
yes,
goes a long
yes.
way.
And don't say things like, oh, you really have your hands full, don't you, mama? She knows.
Right.
I like to say with my clients, especially if we're working through like breastfeeding problems and maybe things aren't going so great. And, even during the session, maybe like it's not going how I know mom wants it to. Say, okay, let's just pause and let's just look at this baby. And we give a moment for that eye contact and I'll say, look at your baby. Look how he is looking at you. Oh my gosh, he is so in love with you. Look how perfect you guys are together. I mean, and you can just feel the glow and the lift that's all it takes. That acknowledgement and that you're doing a really good job.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I guess that's it for today.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for your time, Nicole.
Absolutely. This was my pleasure. Thank you for the invitation.